Hey there, and welcome back to Rival Reviews. So it's been a couple weeks, and I found that the majority of things have probably more or less reached their halfway point. So I thought that we would go over all stuff going on again, and give it a talk and everything else like that. Hope everybody is having a good time, and let's get into it. So what I found the weirdest, and I find that this happens every summer season, is that we get these really jagged timelines in terms of a release schedule. Case in point, the first one that I want to talk about today is this past weekend, My Hero Academia season 7 came up. I know a lot of people obviously are probably pretty excited about this one. I know I've been watching since the beginning. So I'm always obviously appreciative when a new season comes out. And what else I love about this is that because we're already 7 seasons in, I find with a lot of the animes that are currently happening right now, they're still, we're introducing characters still, we're maybe just getting into the meat of what is going to be happening in the season, where season 7 of My Hero Academia, it's already, established. You know what I mean? So, like, we already know our characters, we already know what's going on. So, like, right off the bat, we got Star and Stripe coming in, fighting Shigaraki, like, right away. And that's, like, episode 1. Which obviously is a huge up to situations like this. Like, I feel like that it's nice, obviously, to be able to have one that, instead of the first episode trying to give you a taste and trying to reel you in. Obviously, if you're already 7 seasons in and you're watching this, you already know what's up. You already know what's going on. You don't need an introduction to these characters, or the stakes of the world and everything else of what's going on, and they just get to get right into the action. So obviously, I'm very excited, especially due to the fact that how Stars and Stripe, what is the New Order, that quirk? Oh my god. So ridiculously overpowered, and I'm so excited to see what else can be done with it. And the crazy part was, too, is that, we already kind of got, a stacked introduction to, how the power is used, and then how the power can, be, amped up to the extreme. As this last episode ended, obviously we see that she's going to be able to utilize the missiles or rockets, however you want to put them, in some way. Obviously, because this is episode 1, I'm sure, not to say that it won't do damage, but obviously, Shigaraki will come out of this. Obviously, he is the big bad, so he's not going to get taken out 2 episodes into the new season. But we do know, obviously, with the introduction of how this episode started, and Deku kind of saying that this is definitely the countdown to the ultimate fight, right? Where it's obviously going to end up being Deku versus Shigaraki. Again, I do know in the realm of this manga, obviously, I know that a lot of things are happening, and I know that there are a lot of crazy things happening. I try my best to try and stay away from the spoilers, because I've been watching this anime from day one. And also the release schedules has been pretty consistent. And there doesn't seem to be a huge lull in between seasons, which I also love, so I don't find myself having the impulse of needing to read it. I know, for instance, I think case in point, One Piece was, or not One Piece, so that's a bad example, but there's a lot of isekai ones, because of them being isekais and stuff like that. They had the one season, they weren't exactly the greatest, because, a lot of isekais aren't, they're kind of just recycled and everything else like that. But because, I wanted to see how the world went, or I wanted to see how far it would go, and, it had maybe been a couple years since the season 2, so it was pretty unlikely that it wasn't going to happen, so I felt like I had to read it. But with My Hero Academia, I find that, it's a year tops, and then you generally get a new season, which, especially with how jam-packed seasons are nowadays, I have enough, source material of other things to bide my time waiting for the new season to come out. So I don't feel it's not as necessary to read it, and so far so good. Um, in terms of the manga spoilers or anything like that, I don't know how far there is. I know that there are some hints that I've accidentally ran into, but I try not to focus on them. But yeah, obviously super excited that this is back for this season, and I'm looking forward to what is going to be coming up, obviously, this season. Moving on to I was reincarnated as the 7th prince, so I can take my time perfecting my magical ability. This one, like I said, kind of like when we initially started this one, it's not really meant to like it doesn't really have a progressive story, if that makes sense. In this way, it kind of seems more like stronger to the fact of, it. I find that its strength is that it explores how OP he can possibly be, if that makes sense, and in different classes of magic too. Obviously we were introduced to him by him, doing crazy multi-leveled magic to defeat the demon and everything else. Now we've moved on to, he's mastered kind of like monster taming by being able to send his will through mana to send it to creatures. In the latest episode, he also created something with his older brother called a spellbound sword, which basically he was able to, I guess, in the process or whatever, you put the enchant, because he had already in a past episode enchanted a sword, but I guess the spellbound sword is different in the sense that you can actually incorporate magic into it instead of it just being strengthened or have self-repair or something like that. You can actually, what they created was a spellbound sword that every time it was swung, it would throw a fireball. So it's interesting. And then obviously we had the key breathing magic that he's incorporated into his practice and everything else. So yeah, essentially there really is no progression to a big baddie by any means, because he's already faced 2 demons, and both of them, you can barely call them fights. Basically it was just him being completely overpowered and basically him just toying with the demons, which should be, insane. But then doing also the kind of almost comedic thing of nobody knowing that he's this strong because he's a child. So it kind of has that little aspect to it. So yeah, I wouldn't say that this is a watch if you're looking for some crazy in-depth story with, in-depth character development and everything else. This is literally just Lloyd being an overpowered sorcerer that's an 8-year-old, and just basically having fun learning new ways to apply his overpowered sorcery. And there's some borderline him torturing his opponents in the long run. So it's a fun watch. It's not one that I'm generally super excited for every week, but it's mindless fun. It would be the best way that I could put it. Next up is the banished former hero lives as he pleases. This one is odd. Like I spoke about before, this probably has one of the lowest ratings of an isekai that I've seen in a very long time. Or I guess this really isn't a isekai. I guess you could call it a reincarnation story, I guess. The weird part about this is that we're already about 7 episodes in, and the point that we've gotten to, it's interesting because so the 6 episodes, so basically right halfway through, turned into essentially it all amalgamated into this big final fight versus the dad that was borrowing the demon's powers was trying to take over, I guess, the duchy of where they were living, essentially, by basically trying to rob its inhabitants of their free will. Um, the interesting part about this is that entire fight, so the setup of, the brother feeling inferior to him and the dad calling him a failure because he's the reason that his old wife died and everything else. The ending of that took place all in one episode. So the brother tries to rush the hero, or Alan. He knocks him out. Then the hero, the hero in this, I guess, the hero character that was born, tries to fight the demon dad off, is unable to, and then basically he has the little interior monologue where he can see his dad's like inner rage, and that's why he was powered the way he was. He stabs it. His dad says his mom's name one last time and drifts off like dust into oblivion. It all kind of wraps up. The king offers him the duchy, like, to become the new duke. He declines. So then the princess that was supposed to be his fiancée and was the princess then now became the duke, which I don't really understand, like, why the downgrade. And then he was going to set off for an adventure, and then the princess or now duke, I guess, or duchess, decides to ditch the duchy to go to the empire where, I guess, he was originally from in his previous life. And it still seems to encompass the whole idea that the demons are the bad guy. But the weird part is that, like, the entire first half, we're seeing the behind the scenes of, the dad teaming up with the demon and making this grand plan and trying to assassinate the princess and everything else. And then all of those efforts fail. And then, what it looked like to me was supposed to be the big baddie, which was the dad taken over by the big demon powers and everything else. He was, kind of overpowered for, a minute, and then the fight was over. So, though I know this has a really low rating on Crunchyroll, I guess what it actually came down to, and the reasoning for the low rating, was because people were mad that it actually, I guess, premiered later than it was supposed to. But honestly, the 3.1 rating I find is actually, pretty spot on, at least in my opinion, because, like, I really have no idea where this is going to. The one thing that I can say too is that a lot of people were also ranking this one below because I guess the light novel that this one is based on. Again, I haven't read it, so I can't obviously give my 100% opinion, but essentially from what it looks like to me is they apparently changed a whole bunch of stuff and people are upset about it. So kind of seems like to me that maybe the light novel would obviously be stronger than this anime adaptation. Like I said, I'm already kind of halfway through, so, there's probably going to be 5 episodes left, and I'll, finish it up. But, so far, if I had to pick the most lackluster of the season so far, it would definitely be this one. Next up, chillin' in another world with level 2 super cheat powers. So this one, again, I would say is like a really, like, chill watch, to say the least. Like, I wouldn't say that, like, I'm, like, immediately excited when I see that it is updated or whatever, but it's a fun watch. Kind of where we're at right now, we're kind of at, like, a little bit of a, I guess you could call a serious situation where, the quote-unquote hero is jealous of the fact that our main character is clearly way more overpowered than he is. So he's unleashed this Dijin to essentially murder him. And she messed with his girl, and now he's just he's gonna snap and gonna beat her up a little bit. I do know that I have read ahead of this one, and I'm trying to remember the direction it goes, but I'm pretty positive that he doesn't end up killing the Dijin and actually ends up teaming up with them. Um, and again, like obviously, like other things that are currently happening is that like they've put up a temporary kind of field in the kingdom. They say that it'll last probably 2 to 3 months to keep the Dark Army out, but in the process, it put all of the kingdom's magicians into a coma. So they're kind of just delaying the inevitable at this point. And obviously, from what we've learned until this point, Fleo has no interest in joining either side because he doesn't want to fight anybody. He just wants to be a merchant, which is also funny because we're getting this like balance of, you know, crazy isekai OP magic fights meets, you know, guy just wants to be a merchant and he's looking for the best deals in town. Like to the point where like, you know, he was about to have to fight the kingdom and instead he transported his entire village, like little village farm thing that he's created, plus his party of friends to a completely different part of the world. Um, like that's how far he's willing to go for his peace and quiet. So yeah, I would say all in all, it's a chill watch. And yeah, I'll continue watching it from here because obviously I kind of want to see where this goes in terms of, you know, the fight with the hero because, or the quote unquote hero, because clearly he's going to get his comeuppance at some point. So, you know, that'll be fun to watch. I got reincarnated as a slime goblin edition, however, or how it's actually named Remonster. Is actually done fairly well this season. I'm not gonna lie, I'm thoroughly enjoying it. Like I kind of said before, and to the introduction of this show, it is extremely similar to I Reincarnate as a Slime. It's kind of starting to deviate a little bit now. At the beginning, kind of the same concept, you know, he just wants to live in unity with all the species. He doesn't really care about who's a human, who's an elf, who's whatever. And then of course he's completely overpowered because he can essentially eat things and gain their abilities. One thing I will say, obviously, instead of trying to create, like, I guess, a utopia, I guess in a sense it has kind of happened in Remonster accidentally, but now instead of trying to create, I guess, like a village kind of, or a city kind of similarly in Reincarnated as a Slime, this one he's now created kind of almost like a merchant guild. And now he's basically trying to help the elves against the basically the war that the humans are trying to have against them. We've kind of learned somewhat more of the stakes now, so essentially the reason that the humans want to go toward for the elves is because the elves have this, I guess, medicine that cures all ailments, and I guess this country's princess has this disease that I guess is 99% fatal. And the number one rule of this medicine, I guess, in elf culture is you do not share it with the humans. Which is what I guess has started this entire war. Something that is kind of interesting though now is that in the latest episode, our main character here, he's drank this medicine now, and now it seems that like just a single drop of his blood has the same kind of effect as this medicine does. Which makes me believe that he's probably going to use that to his advantage and maybe go save this princess, maybe. Just because obviously there's no saying that he's not allowed to share, so to speak, right? So that's currently what is happening in that right now. And yeah, like I said, if you are a fan of slime, you're definitely going to be a fan of this one, so I would definitely give it a shot. And I am thoroughly enjoying it, so I don't see why you wouldn't. Windbreaker has still been one of my favorites this season so far, for sure. I think one of my favorite parts about this is that, like I said before, kind of when I introduced it, it is very reminiscent to Tokyo Revengers. But it's also like kind of like a feel good story of like, it's interesting because you in any other kind of anime aspect or any other kind of background, they would be known as like the troublemakers, the ones to look out for, and like a lot of people, I guess, complain that it promotes gang culture and everything else like that. But it's interesting in the sense because they're doing it for a sense of good, and like it's almost as if it's like a necessity, especially in where I guess this school is located, or the neighborhood rather, I guess, that it's located in. And right now it's obviously really fun right now because we're kind of like in an almost like I guess a tournament-esque arc where essentially they're going against at least what I think is, I guess, going to be the big baddie, I guess you could say, or the big conflict. Essentially you got the two kind of gangs going against each other, and already two fights have happened, and both people from Furin have basically, just like embarrassed is probably the best way that I can put it. Shishitorin's fights. It's interesting because I know that I don't know, at least in my mind there should be some sort of conflict where, like, you would think that somebody would from the good team would lose, but so far two of the newbies, I guess you could say, or the first years, I guess in this case, have like literally embarrassed the other members of this group. And now the only people you have left are the actual, like, leader of the gang, as well as our main character, and then one of the other co-captains. So I think it would be definitely interesting, especially at this point. I don't know, like, maybe, I guess I could see, because I do know that, like, one of the fights, obviously, like, our main character is supposed to be facing the other co-captain. So, like, maybe he has to lose to get some sort of, lesson, I guess. I don't know, it's just gonna be interesting because, like, you would think that, like, in this type of situation, because there's 5 fights, they go 2 and 2, and then, the main fighter, like, the main fight, which is supposed to be between the two leaders, is the one that's going to, mean the most. But I guess realistically, at the end of the day, the other 4 fights weren't really necessary. The only fight that actually had, like, stakes is the one between the 2 gang leaders. So yeah, so like I said, I'm enjoying it. I like the back and forth. It's always fun to, see the embarrassment of other fighters and stuff like that. So yeah, all in all, I would say that this is still looking to be probably one of my favorites of the season for sure. Kind of going back and flip-siding to Slime. I don't want to say I'm bored, but I kind of am. And don't get me wrong, like, I understand what they're doing, and I understand the premise of what they're doing and everything else like that. But we are so far, 6 episodes into this new season, and it has been, and I know I've seen this joke online, and I'm not trying to, like, copy it by any means, but it has literally just been 6 episodes of, like, meetings, essentially. We've gotten it from every angle too. Like, we've seen it from, like, we got first we kind of got the, I guess, meeting that was meant to basically recap what happened last season with Rimuru becoming, a demon, an official demon lord. And then we had, like, kind of like the reactions from all the major cities, as well as the church and everything else like that. And then we had the actual meeting with Tempest about, like, kind of like what the next steps are. Then we kind of had the reaction. We had an episode of, like, the reaction of Rimuru becoming a demon lord from everybody. And then in the latest one, we now know that the Saint, like the War Council of the Holy Empire, basically Rimuru has invited Hinata to basically a rematch from their fight from a couple seasons ago. Whether that's actually what's going to happen, to say the least, I don't see that happening. But at least now, from what I can gather, at least from the direction, it looks like we're actually going to be getting some semblance of, like, actually something new. Especially when it comes to these long series and everything else like that, where, there's a lot of world building and character development and everything else. I can deal with a couple episodes of War Council, but to literally have the first 6 episodes of a new season after being away for a while because the last arc, you took a break from the last arc to do a movie, and you've been gone for so long, like, it's a lot. And again, I can also understand why they did it for that very reason, maybe, like, to give everybody a refresher because it had been so long. But I honestly felt that, one review probably would have sufficed. And again, granted, this could be also based on the source material. I haven't read it, so maybe it is supposed to be this kind of drawn out pace. But I am looking forward to the fact that I think we are finally going to be moving away from that and actually getting some, like, new, fresh, some fight sequences or at least some semblance of, like, an important plot point to move the story forward. That's what I'm kind of hoping for. If not this week coming up, hopefully the next week at the very least. Next up is Oblivion Battery, and if I'm being honest, I'm still kind of hot and cold about it. Don't get me wrong, still love the fact that I have a sports anime in my rotation this season. So basically, just to catch up kind of in the halfway point, they've had, like, a practice match finally with a team that, like, the actual, like, all the players basically got offers to, but decided to quit. And of course they got humbled because basically the catcher who has the amnesia got a fastball right in the face mask without catching it, and it scared the crap out of him. And he wasn't able to catch anymore at full speed, so his pitcher battery mate decided to pitch at half speed for the rest of the game. Then they got mercy ruled in the 5th. Basically, essentially, for at least from what I'm gathering from the pattern of this, is that it definitely looks like we're going to now kind of, this is the dip, this is the hurdle that the catcher has to get through, because essentially he's trying to reteach him his whole game, but he also half has the muscle memory, so he has to basically he has to relearn how to handle the game of baseball, I guess is probably the best way to put it. The problem that I think that I'm having the most is that I'm not a huge fan of the main characters, I think is the problem. Like, I'm loving the fact of having an anime that's baseball related and everything else like that, but the fact that I don't enjoy the personalities of the main characters is sort of making it difficult to, I think, enjoy it as much as I hoped that I would have. Yeah. So I guess we'll see from there, and you know what? Maybe by the end of it, they'll be a bit more likable to me when they get to the point where they're learning that they know, once he knows that he knows what he's doing. I'm gonna keep watching it, but I guess we will see. Next up was God's Games We Play. This one is, I don't know, it's okay. I think the problem that I'm having with this one is that the stakes aren't exactly clear. Like, obviously we know at the beginning that the whole idea was that they need to win 10 games and they get their wish granted and everything else like that, but last episode, we were then introduced to the idea that because you have to like sign up ahead of time to get into these games, it's going to take them like 2 or 3 months to get into their next game, and they've only won four. So I don't know. I feel like at the 6 episode mark, we should be, I would think, at least halfway there. And then instead of, I guess, playing the actual games, they're now kind of playing in this like world tournament to determine the best players to kind of like, I guess, fill the void of their boredom, I guess. Um, like I said, it's still a fun watch, and last episode was like this really. The best way that I could describe it is a really odd game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That was also more strategic. Like there was like half like damage points, but then there was also like almost kind of like a shoots and ladders type of dealy with trap spaces, and yeah, it was very weird. It was fun, and it's fun to watch. But I am interested to see where it actually ends up going from here. Just because, like I said, I like unless we're going to be getting some time leaps or like some like I guess like game montage of like them going through a whole bunch. I don't really understand how I guess the timing of all this is going to work. Um, Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation. Again, this one is kind of more so. Again, we're not going to get as many fights this season, like I kind of described beforehand when we first started this. It's going to be a lot more based on the family life. So the sisters have finally gotten there. They're, starting school. The maid sister is getting to be a maid like she's always wanted to, which is weird, but, that's how her character's written. And then we're kind of going through right now, like, the idea that they're having a hard time. Norn is kind of having a hard time, like, she's having, like, kind of like an inferiority complex because Aisha is, like, kind of the smart one. And also, like, Norn, I guess, had a really bad first opinion of him. So she's kind of having a hard time, like, getting over that. So like I said, the kind of unfortunate thing is that this season is really going to be solely based more on character development more than anything else. Which is kind of unfortunate because I know where the story is going, and I don't think we're going to get to any kind of sort of like fantasy realm of fighting or anything like that this season, unfortunately. But like I said, if you are a fan of the stories and you are a fan of like the family life kind of aspect of it, it is fun in that regard. I am interested to see where the ending point of this one is, because I do know that sometimes Jobless Reincarnation has gone 12 or 24. If it goes to 24, we might get some action, but I think if it gets to 12, they'll probably introduce the idea of them going to that lost area to go find his mom finally, is probably where this is going to end up if you've like read the light novel. So yeah. As a reincarnated aristocrat, I'll use my appraisal skill to rise in the world. This one, again, we're still kind of more so still doing the character development. Just recently, obviously, we've gotten the magic wielder and we've gotten the warrior kind of character. This latest episode, we actually met his fiance that he didn't know that he had, which is kind of fun in that front. I find that a lot of the action doesn't really, like, obviously, like, there is kind of like a war in the background going on the whole time, pretty much, which is kind of the whole premise of him collecting these people in the first place. But we haven't really actually gotten any glimpses of that so far. This was kind of the first episode, at least that I found, that was kind of more raising the stakes of, like, the political turmoil that basically the duchy as a whole is kind of under. So that in itself kind of helped. And then of course there was just kind of like the funny, like, like I said, like, met the fiance he didn't have, so that was kind of funny. yeah. So all in all, that one's pretty fun. I would say all in all, I am interested to see where this goes, and I'm the only concern that I guess that I have currently going into the halfway point of this one is that it is going to end with the time leap of him at his father's funeral and taking over, and then it's going to end there. That would be kind of unfortunate because I feel as if the actual fighting and the military tactics and the strategy and everything else doesn't come until after that fact. So that is kind of my one concern about the timing of this one. That is kind of the one thing that I am about. But we shall see. And then the irregular Magic High School, I find that the pacing on this one, at least, it seems to be yet again what are the kind of the not the detriment that I see, but it kind of is to this series, is that at the beginning of every single one of these seasons, it introduces all of I guess the important characters of that season. It's it seems to follow a pattern where it introduces everybody of value, both new and old, and then goes more into the story. And I find that that's kind of where it's at right now, is that it's still very much into the introductory stage. But my concern with that is that we're already halfway through. The other part that always kind of struggle with every season of this show is that you don't know which, I guess, domino is going to fall. You have the anti-magic squads, you have the interior conflict of the school, you have the interior family dynamic that they have to of all the different clans and everything else. And every season it introduces a different, I guess, recurring problem that's happening in each of those areas. But you never know really until later into the season which one is going to be the main, I guess, big baddie in this case I guess you could say it that way. So it will be interesting to see, I guess, where it goes from there, just because I feel as if this one's going to be more political as well. Obviously there's the cool magic and that's already kind of there, and then we have the new engineering department and how that's going to be important, but I don't know where it's going to are we going to get more anti-magic legion fights, or are we going to get more political strife in the clans? That's where it kind of seems to be kind of leaning towards right now, so it'll be interesting to see which direction that goes. And then the final thing that I wanted to bring up for this week was Kaiju number 8. This wasn't initially on my list for things to watch, and I think the initial thing that threw me off at first is that this one actually started a bit later than everything else. Everything kind of started right at the end of March, early April, where this one was kind of smack dab in the middle of April. So it kind of went under my radar. And also, I'm not really too at least when I was initially looking, it kind of looked more sci-fi than anything else, which doesn't really hit for me. I've never really been a big fan of any of the Gundams or any of the alien ones or anything like that. But this one kind of hits that nice area of, because when I think kaiju, I think the classics, Mothra, Godzilla, things like that. So that's why I was kind of I appreciate those for what they are, but I wouldn't say that I'm a fan of them. But now learning that, basically this is literally, a feel-good story of a guy that wanted to be a hero, basically, essentially a hero in this world, or I guess what I'm trying to remember exactly what they're called here. They're part of the defense force in this anime, and he kept failing. So he finally is a 32-year-old, and he's part of the cleanup crew instead. So instead of actually being part of the defense team, he's cleaning up the guts of the monsters that are left over once the defense team is through. Um, but then basically what happens is this, I guess, kaiju-esque bug is the best way that I can describe it. Literally only looks at him and says, "Oh, I found you," and forces himself down his throat and turns him into, I don't know, kind of gives him like a kaiju power suit is the best way that I could, because at first I thought it was just going to turn him completely, but then you learn, a couple episodes in, that he can actually control when he's in it, and it looks kind of like a power suit, like think like a Power Ranger, but like he looks like a monster essentially. And he has the power to put, well, he's not very good at controlling it, but for argument's sake, he can take it on and off. And then once it's on, he has like the same power as a kaiju. Hence kaiju number 8. He's unnamed because basically he's one of the first kaijus ever that the defense force tried to fight, but he was able to hide, obviously, because, he can turn back into human. So nobody is looking at humans for being a kaiju. As it stands right now, it looks like that we're about to get a reveal of him, basically showing off that he can do this. Right now, he is hiding his powers, which is kind of like, an archetype of these type of things. So I'll be interested to see kind of the drama that comes from there. But either way, I wanted to throw this one on here because I had not talked about it at first. But it's definitely one that I'm going to be following, and I wasn't even aware. I was looking at my anime list, and it's super popular. Like I said, it went completely under my radar, so I wanted to let you guys know it is now on my watch list. And I am looking forward to see where it goes. So that's all I have for catch up. I'm just trying to think. Currently right now, what I am currently reading, I just want to get, because it's one of those long titles. Yes. Forced to be a princess after reincarnating into another world. So this one is an interesting read because it's almost like, well, at first you think it's a reincarnation story, and then it turns out to actually be a transmigration story. And it's one of those kind of classic, like, she's from the modern world, she was a police officer, she had, she lived in modern day society where, women, well, for the most part, we can get into that argument, but anyway, have equal footing, and, they're not looked down because of their gender and everything else like that, where she then gets reincarnated as, like, a slave in a society where women are very looked down upon because of who they have, just for the sheer fact that they aren't men. And then, of course, so it's her kind of, like, navigating that, so there's that aspect, but it's also, like, because she was a police officer, she was trained in, like, martial arts and everything else like that, she's bringing, like, that kind of badassery, so, like, first couple chapters, she reincarnates as a slave, and she beats the crap out of her slave master, and then basically a whole bunch of stuff happens, and she becomes the mistress of the third prince, hence the princess part of the title. And kind of goes from there. There's a lot more that obviously I don't want to spoil if you don't want to read it, but I would say if you are looking for something to read and you like those kind of reincarnation badass female lead stories, it definitely hits that niche. So I guess I will see you guys next time, and I hope you guys enjoy. Bye bye.